Hello class, and welcome to reading class. This is my second time doing this video because somehow it got deleted off the post. So here we are again introducing this lesson for Monday. Now, this is an important lesson, I believe, because for the first time this is the first week that you will have reading vocabulary words. Now, these will not be hard, but there will be, we'll start out with 5. We might go up to 6 or so. In 5th and 6th grade, they have these each week as part of the reading, so I feel like it's important for us to do it too as part of the curriculum. Look at the words that you will have, and you will have a quiz this week, and it will be part of your reading grade. And these words will show up in stories, and so it's really good, so then when you come to them, you will know what they mean. So let's look. Ambitious, having the desire to achieve something. Ambitious. Okay? I was ambitious today when I went out into the garden. It was so beautiful, and I was full of ambition. I was ambitious. Appropriate, suitable. Something is appropriate, suitable. If it's not appropriate, it's not suitable for whatever it is you're talking about or whatever it is you are involved with. Contraption, a gadget, any mechanical device that one does not fully understand is known as a contraption. See that? Contraption. Limber, easily bent, flexible. You know, when we did our health, being limber is something that we talked about in our book. Is good health exercises keep us limber. Retreat, to withdraw, to go backward. To retreat, to go back. Someone retreats, they're drawing back from something. They are retreating. So know those, study them, write them in your reading notebook, and practice them for Friday or Thursday if you take it early, which is fine too, with this week being a little different in that respect. So we're going to start out with our book. We're going to read some and just read together. I'm going to start out on page 160, which doesn't have a page number, but this page is 60, not 160. 60. Farms. What jolly things are farms! Many things in one. I could not count their charms from now till set of sun. Their lambs and sheep and pens, their sties of pigs and sows, their yards of cocks and hens, their byres of calves and cows, their fields of grass and corn, their gardens with the wall, where cabbages are born, and beans and peas and all. Their dairies clean and cool, their duck ponds round and green, their sheds where every tool of every sort is seen, their barns and harness rooms full of delightful smells, their borders full of blooms, their ladders, pumps and wells. There are lots of which one makes great playrooms full of fun, their kitchens where the farm wife bakes her loaves and pies and little cakes, and always gives you one. Eleanor Fionn. And you recognize her name because of some other poems that you have learned too, but this one's all about being on the farm. Beautiful day, just like today. And I'm sitting outside as I'm doing this with you. Look, a dragonfly. When the heat of the summer made drowsy the land, a dragonfly came and sat on my hand, with his blue-jointed body and wings like spun glass. It lit on my fingers as though they were grass. Boy, with the dragonfly that landed on him. Well, before we go into our next story, guess what? There's a special guest here today. Look. What's going on here? What are you doing in there? What's going on in there? What's going on in there? Ork. Hello. Guess what? The story today is about a friend of mine. Actually, a relative of mine. And we penguins are peculiar in certain ways. But my friend is going to be in the story, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. So you read along, and I'll be here reading with you as I speak through my beak. Look. Aha! Thank you, sir. Captain Cook from Mr. Popper's Penguins. Richard and Florence Atwater. Guess what? This story is a piece of the book entitled Mr. Popper's Penguins, so I hope you enjoy it. Read along with me in your book as I read it aloud, and then there will be some questions at the end. "Call who, Captain Cook?" asked Mrs. Popper, who had come in so quietly that none of them had heard her. "Why, the penguins," said Mr. Popper. "I was just saying," he went on, as Mrs. Popper sat down suddenly on the floor to recover from her surprise, "that we'd name him after Captain Cook. He was a famous English explorer who lived about the time of the American Revolution. He sailed all over where no one had ever been before. He didn't actually get to the South Pole, of course, but he made a lot of important scientific discoveries about the Antarctic regions. He was a brave man and a kind leader, so I think Captain Cook would be a very suitable name for our penguin here." There's the penguin. "Well, I never," said Mrs. Popper. "Gort," said Captain Cook, suddenly getting lively again. With a flap of his flippers, he jumped from the tub to the washstand and stood there for a minute surveying the floor. Then he jumped down, walked over to Mrs. Popper, and began to peck her ankle. To survey the floor. You know what survey means? To look around, okay? Look around. You won't see it there, but that's what survey means. So he pecked her ankle. "Stop him, Papa!" screamed Mrs. Popper, retreating into the hallway with Captain Cook after her, and Mr. Popper and the children following. In the living room she paused. So did Captain Cook, for he was delighted with the room. Now, a penguin may look very strange in a living room, but a living room looks very strange to a penguin. Even Mrs. Popper had a smile as they watched Captain Cook, with the light of curiosity in his excited, circular eyes, and his black tailcoat dragging pompously behind his little pinkish feet, strut from one upholstered chair to another, pecking at each to see what it was made of. Then he turned suddenly and marched out to the kitchen. "Maybe he's hungry," said Janie. Captain Cook immediately marched up to the refrigerator. "Gork!" he inquired, turning to slant his head wisely at Mrs. Popper and looking at her pleadingly with his right eye. "He certainly is cute," she said. "I guess I'll have to forgive him for biting my ankle. He probably only did it out of curiosity. Anyway, he's a nice, clean-looking bird." "Or," repeated the penguin, nibbling at the metal handle of the refrigerator door with his upstretched beak. Mr. Popper opened the door for him, and Captain Cook stood very high and leaned his sleek black head back so that he could see inside. Now that Mr. Popper's work was over for the winter, the icebox was not quite so full as usual, but the penguin did not know that. "What did you suppose he likes to eat?" asked Mrs. Popper. "Let's see," said Mr. Popper as he removed all the food and set it on the kitchen table. Now, Captain Cook, take a look." The penguin jumped up onto a chair, and from there on the ledge of the table, flapping his flippers again to recover his balance. Then he walked solemnly around the table and between the dishes of food, inspecting everything with the greatest interest, though he touched nothing. Finally, he stood still, very erect, raised his beak to point at the ceiling, and made a loud, almost purring sound. "Orr," he trilled. So, again, he solemnly walked around. Remember what solemnly means? It's on this page. Seriously, bravely, solemnly. There he is, looking at everything. That's a penguin's, this trilling sound he made, or, you know. That's a penguin's way of saying how pleased it is, said Mr. Popper, who had read about it in his Antarctic books. Apparently, however, what Captain Cook wanted to show was that he was pleased with their kindness rather than with their food. For now, to their surprise, he jumped down and walked into the dining room. "I know," said Mr. Popper. "We ought to have some seafood for him, canned shrimps or something, or maybe he isn't hungry yet. I've read that penguins go for a month without food." "Mama! Papa!" said Bill. "Come see what Captain Cook has done." Captain Cook had done it all right. He had discovered the bowl of goldfish on the dining room windowsill. By the time Mrs. Popper reached over to lift him away, he had already swallowed the last of the goldfish. "Bad, bad penguin," reproved Mrs. Popper, glaring down at Captain Cook. Captain Cook squatted guiltily on the carpet and tried to make himself look small. "He knows he's done wrong," said Mr. Popper. "Isn't he smart?" "Maybe we can train him," said Mrs. Popper. "Bad, naughty captain," she said to the penguin in a loud voice. "Bad to eat the goldfish." And she spanked him on his round black head. Before she could do that again, Captain Cook hastily waddled out to the kitchen. There the Poppers found him trying to hide in the still-opened refrigerator. He was squatting under the ice cube coils, under which he could barely squeeze sitting down. His round, white-circled eyes looked out at them mysteriously from the dimness of the inside of the box. "I think that's about the right temperature for him." At that, said Mr. Popper, "we could let him sleep there at night." "But where will I put the food?" asked Mrs. Popper. "Oh, I guess we can get another ice box for food," said Mr. Popper. "Look," said Janie. "He's gone to sleep." Mr. Popper turned the cold control switch to its coldest so that Captain Cook could sleep more comfortably. Then he left the door ajar so that the penguin would have plenty of fresh air to breathe. Do you know what leaving the door ajar means? It means slightly open, so he left it slightly open. He left it ajar. "Tomorrow I will have the icebox service department send a man out to bore some holes in the door for air," he said, "and then he can put a handle on the inside of the door so that Captain Cook can go in and out of the refrigerator as he pleases." "Well, dear me, I never thought we would have a penguin for a pet," said Mrs. Popper. "Still, he behaves pretty well, on the whole, and he is so nice and clean that perhaps he will be a good example to you and the children. And now, I declare, we must get busy. We haven't done anything but watch the bird. Papa, will you just help me to set the beans on the table, please?" "Just a minute," answered Mr. Popper. "I just happen to think that Captain Cook will not feel right on the floor of that ice box. Penguins make their nests of pebbles and stones, so I would just take some ice cubes out of the tray and put them under him. That way he will be more comfortable." The next day was quite eventful at 432 Proudfoot Avenue. First there was the serviceman, and then the policeman, and then the trouble about the license. Captain Cook was in the children's room watching Janie and Bill put together a jigsaw puzzle on the floor. He was very good about not disturbing the pieces after Bill had spanked him for eating one. he did not hear the refrigerator serviceman come to the back door. Mrs. Popper had gone marketing for canned shrimps for the Penguin, so that Mr. Popper was alone in the kitchen to explain to the serviceman what he wanted done to the refrigerator. The serviceman put his tool bag down on the kitchen floor, looked at the refrigerator, and then at Mr. Popper, who, to tell the truth, had not shaved yet and was not very tidy. "Mister," he said, "you don't need the ventilating holes in that there door." "It's my icebox, and I want some holes bored in the door," said Mr. Popper. They argued about it for a while. Mr. Popper knew that to get the serviceman to do what he wanted, all he had to do was explain that he was going to keep a live penguin in the icebox, and that he wanted his pet to have plenty of fresh air, even though the door was closed all night. He felt a little stubborn about explaining, however. He didn't want to discuss Captain Cook with this unsympathetic serviceman, who was already staring at Mr. Popper as if he thought Mr. Popper was not quite right in his head. "Come on, do what I said," said Mr. Popper. "I'm paying you for it." "With what?" asked the serviceman. Mr. Popper gave him a $5 bill. It made him a little sad to think how many beans it would have bought for Mrs. Popper and the children. The serviceman examined the bill carefully, as if he didn't trust Mr. Popper too much. But at last he put it in his pocket, took a drill from his tool bag, and made 5 small holes in a neat pattern on the refrigerator door. "Now," said Mr. Popper, "don't get up. Wait a minute. There is one more thing." "Now what?" said the serviceman. "I suppose now you want me to take the door off its hinges to let in a little more air? Or do you want me to make a radio set out of your icebox?" "Don't get funny," said Mr. Popper indignantly. "That is no way to talk. Believe it or not, I know what I am doing. Having you do. I want you to fix an extra handle on the inside of the box so it can be opened from the inside of the box." "That," said the serviceman, "is a fine idea." "You want an extra handle on the inside? Sure. He picked up his tool bag. "Aren't you going to do it for me?" asked Mr. Popper. "Oh, sure, said the serviceman, edging toward the back door. Mr. Popper saw that for all his words of agreement, the serviceman had no intention of putting on an inside handle. "I thought you were a serviceman," he said. "I am. That's the first sensible thing you've said yet." "You're a fine kind of serviceman if you don't even know how to put an extra handle on the inside of an icebox door." "Oh, I don't, do I? Don't think I don't know how. As far as that goes, I've even got a spare handle in my tool bag and plenty of screws. You needn't think I don't know how to do it, if I wanted to." Mr. Popper silently reached into his pocket and gave the serviceman his last $5 bill. He was pretty sure that Mrs. Popper would be annoyed at him for spending all that money. But it could not be helped. "Mister," he said to the serviceman, "you win. I'll fix your extra handle. And while I'm doing it, you sit down on that chair over there facing me, where I can keep an eye on you." "Fair enough," said Mr. Popper, sitting down. The serviceman was still on the floor, putting in the final screws that held the new handle in place, when the penguin came out to the kitchen on his silent pink feet. Surprised at seeing a strange man sitting on the floor, Captain Cook quietly walked over and began to peck him curiously, but the serviceman was even more surprised than Captain Cook. "Ork!" said the penguin. Or perhaps it was the serviceman. Mr. Popper was not sure just what had happened when he picked up himself and his chair a moment later. There had been a shower of flying tools, a violent slamming of the door, and the serviceman was gone. Look, everything flying as he rushes out. These sudden noises, of course, brought the children running. Mr. Popper showed them how the refrigerator was now all remodeled for the penguin. He showed Captain Cook, too, by shutting him inside it. The penguin at once noticed the shiny new inside handle and bit it with his usual curiosity. The door opened, and Captain Cook jumped out. Mr. Popper promptly put Captain Cook back inside and shut the door again, to be sure that the penguin learned his lesson. Before long, Captain Cook became quite skillful at getting out and was ready to be taught how to get inside when the door was shut. By the time the policeman came to the back door, Captain Cook was going in and out the refrigerator as easily as if he had lived in one all his life. And that brings us just to the end of one part of this story from Mr. Popper's Penguins. I encourage you, if you like that story, you may read the entire book. And it's a wonderful, funny, full of little adventures and escapades of Mr. Popper and his penguins. Question. Let's see who was listening to the story. Why did Mr. Popper name the penguin Captain Cook? Why did Mr. Popper name the penguin Captain Cook? And did you say because penguins live in Antarctica? And Captain Cook had made many discoveries about Antarctic regions. The famous explorer, Captain Cook, explored in that area where penguins are. So, hence the name Captain Cook to his penguin. Number 2, how did Captain Cook show that he was hungry and that he wanted seafood? How did Captain Cook show that he was hungry and that he wanted seafood? And did you say he ate the goldfish? And of course, they weren't happy about that. But that showed he was hungry. Number 3, why did the Poppers want holes drilled in their refrigerator? And did you say Captain Cook liked to be in there to keep cool, but he needed to breathe, so he needed holes to breathe? Number 4, what made Mrs. Popper accept Captain Cook as a pet? What made her actually give in and being all right with them having this penguin as a pet? Well, remember, she had said that he behaved pretty well most of the time, and he was clean, and that maybe he'd be a good example for Mr. Popper and the children. So, what made him accept Captain Cook? He was clean, he was well behaved, and maybe, perhaps, he'd be a good example for the others, Mr. Popper and the children. Well, we have another thing I want us to read here on these pages. Ducks ditty. Along the backwater, through the rushes tall, ducks are a-dabbling, up tails all. Ducks' tails, drakes' tails, yellow feet a-quiver, yellow bills all out of sight, busy in the river. Slushy green undergrowth where the roach swim. Here we keep our larder, cool and full and dim. Everyone for what he likes. We like to be heads down, tails up, dabbling free. High in the blue above, swift swirl and call. We are down and dabbling, up, tails all. And look, here's the duck. The tails are up, right? The ducks. Look who wrote that. Kenneth Graham. Do you know who wrote? You know who else? Or do you know what else Kenneth Graham wrote? Something famous. And one of you, I believe, did your classical reading book report on this story. And it is the story The Wind in the Willows. You remember that with Mr. Toad and Mr. Mole, Mr. Rat and Mr. Badger and all of that? Well, Kenneth Graham wrote that story too. So, something interesting. Look. Our next little poem is called Seal. See how he dives from the rocks with a zoom. See how he darts through his watery room. past crabs and eels and green seaweed, past fluffs of sandy minnow feed. See how he swims with a swerve and a twist, a flip of the flipper, a flick of the wrist. Quicksilver quick, softer than spray, down he plunges and sweeps away. Before you can think, before you can utter words like dill pickle or apple butter, back up he swims past stingray and shark, out with a zoom, a whoop and a bark. Before you can say whatever you wish, he plops at your side with a mouthful of fish. By William J. Smith. This is a whimsical little poem because, it reminds me of Winnie the Pooh, where, the words went around the picture and such like. And, with a twist and a wrist and quicksilver past and down the bottom and a bark. And there you have it. It twists. It looks like the shape of a seal, doesn't it? And there's our seal friend. And do seals bark, it says? Yes, seals bark just like dogs do, in a different way. Arr, 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 arr. A different kind of bark, but it is a bark. See? And there he is. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our reading time today. Before we go, someone wants to say goodbye. Yes, I do. I really hope that you enjoyed that. Especially the part about Mr. Popper and Captain Cook, who happens to be a relative of mine. He's famous forever in that story, which is becoming a classic, Read my beak. We've learned about some peculiar penguins, but don't forget the lesson of every book you ever read. Oh, we should always do that. Yes, and you're warm. It's actually warming up. And you think you want to take those off? Oh no, I always like to be prepared. All right. Well, can you say goodbye? Goodbye. And enjoy reading and love to read always. And be back next time for another adventure. And yes, until next time, be with us in the next video.